Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, good people of Groton. My name is Joanne Moore, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Southeastern Connecticut. Around the room, there are other members of the League. They greeted you when you came in. We have 2 timers sitting in the front row, a couple people collecting your questions on index cards or paper, and 1 person collating the questions into legible handwriting for me. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's event. This event is a panel discussion, not exactly a debate. Its purpose is to provide information to the voters of Groton so that they can make an informed decision on Election Day, November 6th. There is videotaping going on that'll be on the Groton Library website, probably on Thursday, and it'll be downloadable as a YouTube video that you can take then and put onto any social media site that you like. The League of Women Voters asks that you use the recording in its entirety and not use any sound bites in a paid ad. So now let me introduce the panelists. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Bob Frink, who supports a yes vote on the referendum, and Jean-Claude Ambroise.
Close enough.
No, say it, tell
Ambroise.
me. Ambroise, who supports a no vote. Mr. Frink and Mr. Ambroise have agreed to the rules of the panel discussion. The order of their speaking was determined by a coin toss held previously. I will now read the ballot question to you. Shall the Town of Groton Charter be amended and revised as set forth in the November 2017 final report of the 2016 Town of Groton Charter Revision Commission and as on file with the town clerk? Now, I think that's really clear. I don't know why we have to discuss that. Okay, so this charter revision has 4 major sections. 1 on budget referendum, 1 on the elimination of the RTM, 1 on the Board of Finance, and 1 on term of office. We will address each of those 4 sections separately. Each panelist will speak up to 5 minutes on each section and will then answer questions that you have provided on that particular topic, and then we'll move on to the next topic. After the panelists have spoken and answered questions on all 4 topics, we'll accept questions if there's time remaining. Thank you in advance, audience, for your presence here tonight. It really is kudos to our democracy to see so many of you out on this evening. And I want to thank you for your holding any applause or vocal interference until the end of the discussion. It allows our panelists to have more time to present their ideas. So we're going to start first with the budget referendum, and Mr. Frink will be the first speaker. Mr. Frink, tell me what your position is on the budget referendum, and why do you support this change?
Well, thank you, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this on tonight. I want to thank the library for the space, and thank all of you for coming out for this event tonight. The idea of a budget referendum was heavily debated by the Commission. It covered 10 months, or 2/3 of our term. It was not a hasty decision. First and foremost is that a vote on the budget allows each taxpayer to have a voice in town spending. You know your circumstances, and only you can decide what you can afford. It is believed that many people in Groton want that opportunity. Today, your tax bill is determined by as few as 7 or 8 town councilors at a typical voting majority. The RTM doesn't really play a role in our taxes because they have a solid history of approving exactly what the town council approves. So in effect, 7 or 8 elected citizens can determine what our taxes are. We need a lot more than that. We need your voice. Further, the mill rate, when adjusted for the 2016 reevaluation, has gone up 12.6% since 2015, while Social Security has gone up only 2.3% over the same period, making it harder and harder for many on fixed incomes to make tax payments. A budget referendum will give those on fixed income, as well as every other Groton voter, a much-needed voice. 72 towns in Connecticut vote on their budget. That's more than half. Some of these are nearby and include Stonington, East Lyme, Old Saybrook, Clinton, and Madison. Budget referendums are common and have been used for years. The leadership of those towns present the budget to their citizens in a way they can understand and then vote intelligently. They provide a summary that describes and justifies the big expenditures for the coming year, revenue sources, changes and improvements to town government, and a statement on property taxes for the coming year. This sounds exactly like what Stonington does, because it is. This could easily be done in Groton, allowing us to vote intelligently on our budget. No one would have to read a 200-plus page budget book unless they wanted to. Some say Groton is too big to vote on their budget, but Groton has some of the savviest voters around. We averaged 27% turnout over the last 3 municipal elections. There is no reason to think that our voting habits will change drastically. Groton voters already have the right to vote on bonding in excess of $750,000. It's insulting to the citizens of Groton to say that we don't know what we're doing at the polls. We do. We will vote separately on the town and education budgets. This puts accountability for those functions in the right place, and we'll get separate and meaningful justification for each. Madison and Newtown have been doing this for years. The budget referendum is intended to allow the citizens of Groton to have the final say in the budget. This is a better check and balance than the RTM. There is no budget trigger, no minimum voter turnout, and the votes continue until each budget is approved. There are valid reasons why the Commission approved this approach. After much debate, the majority felt that a trigger would end up as a target, and the proposed budget will always be just under it with no incentive to go lower. A minimum voter turnout is an incentive for voters to stay home, and if that happens, the budget passes even if the majority of those who voted said no. In this scenario, people who stayed home count a lot more than folks who actually voted. If there's a limit to the number of votes, then it was felt that the budget would just start high and then come down at the final referendum to where it would have been in the first place. It's true that none of this comes for free. Budget referendums are currently priced around $20,000. I feel they're worth every penny, and it's my belief that they will pay for themselves. In conclusion, a vote on the budget will give us your situation, your vote, your voice. More transparency on big budget items, know where your money is going. Useful budget information so you can vote intelligently. Thank you.
Mr. Ambroise, could you speak on why you oppose the referendum?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to the Southeastern Connecticut League of Women Voters for sponsoring this important debate. Also, I'd like to thank the Groton Public Library staff, Groton Municipal Television for assisting in making this event possible, and for broadcasting it for the rest of the town to view and inform themselves in this critical ballot question. Good evening, Groton residents. The Groton Right to Vote Yes PAC members failed to provide accurate information and advocacy for the proposed Groton Charter amendments and revisions. Primarily, they neglect to mention that on August 21st and October 3rd on 2017, 2 public hearings were held. Those who spoke out against charter revisions outnumbered significantly proponents by an overwhelming majority. Of the few that supported the changes, 6 were members of the CRC, which is the Charter Revision Commission. And also, most importantly, on November 28, 2017, the elected Town Council rejected Charter Revisions Commission's final report by a vote of 5-4, with 1 member who was previously in favor deciding to reject it also. Going to the annual budget referendum, it is false to claim that charter revisions would create a transparent annual budget process. Not everyone's required to vote annually on a budget. Not all residents are voters, and no voter is required to vote. However, every taxpayer in town would be required to cover the $22,000 plus cost of operating all the polling places for each of the potentially unlimited number of budget referendums each year. This is actually one of the items I did support as an RTM member. We, in 2015, had composed a letter to ask the Town Council to consider an annual budget referendum as part of charter revisions. Ironically, this charter revisions will eliminate the RTM, who got the whole process started on the path to what we are discussing today. The Yes platform and signs around town is clearly stated, your money, your vote, or vote on the budget. That sounds very catchy and very appealing to individuals, akin to another slogan we've heard in recent years about making someplace great again. Here is where this slogan falls flat. It will be your money, taxpayers of Groton. At least $20,000 needed to operate the 7 polling places to have on a 3rd Tuesday election in May. It will also be your tax dollars required to fund another $22,000 annual budget referendum if either the town operations budget or Board of Education budget is rejected by the voters. Your vote as an absentee voter will not count due to the 2-week late notice on the failed budget timeline in the Charter Revisions document, meaning that if the budget were to fail, absentee ballot holders will be disenfranchised in the budget process. Connecticut law states absentee voters will not be given a second, third, or fourth opportunity to vote on a budget format because it is less than 21 days from the last referendum. How does this empower the group of Groton voters? In 2017, town council members and Groton residents asked repeatedly to include minimum voter turnout requirement. As Mayor Flack said at the time, he found it hypocritical that the Charter Revision Commission cited poor attendance as a reason to eliminate the RTM, yet they did not include a provision to require voters to come out and vote. There's also no explanatory text on the annual budget referendum, so you'll be voting, Groton residents, on 2 numbers: Board of Ed budget and town council operations, town operations. And here's how it will be proposed on the potential ballot. You either have a choice of saying yes, no it's too high, or no it's too low. So let me pitch this proposition to you all in Groton. If there were 1,000 voters that showed up and 450 people voted yes, there would be 550 votes left on the no side. Let's just say, for example, they would split evenly or close to evenly, around 225 on each one. The question I asked the Groton voters is who would win? To me, I would believe that the yeses would win because that was the majority in the prevailing side. However, no is weighted together. So that means that the vote would fail. So that means we would have to go and spend another $22,000 on a budget referendum and disenfranchising absentee ballot voters. So for these purposes and many other, these changes in Groton are not going to make the town better. A vote no is going to help Groton grow, and a vote yes is going to make a mess.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambrose. So I have some questions here from the audience. What happens if the Board of Ed budget is already at minimum budget requirement as set by the state, and that number is voted as no, too high by the electorate? And Mr. Ambroise, you get the first
Thank you, Joanne.
answer.
That's a great question. If people aren't aware, in Groton, we do have to fulfill a minimum budget requirement by the state, meaning that you cannot go lower than the initial budget proposed from the year previous unless there are some certain circumstances with population in the school district. So what would happen? You would basically have to go back out and vote on a lower number. And what are the consequences of voting on that lower number and it being approved? You would end up losing ECS state funding for the school, which could total millions of dollars. So how is that helping taxpayers, try to rein in spending when you would actually have to spend more to cover the cost of the loss?
Okay, thank you very much. I forgot to note that each speaker gets 75 seconds to answer these questions. Go ahead, Mr. Frink.
Yeah, well, that whole thing is moot because those are advisory questions. Is it too high or too low is advisory. The operative word in a charter is shall, and there is no word in there that says the town council shall follow the too high, too low advisory questions. They're just advisory. So in this case, you're saying if it's they voted it's too low, too high, whatever it was, it's advisory questions. They don't have to follow them. We saw that, I think, in North Stonington this year, where the budget went out the second time at exactly the same number that it went out the first time. They didn't drop it a penny. There's nothing that compels the town council in either direction on those advisory questions.
So just to be clear then, it's the yeses versus the noes combined, and it doesn't matter why, whether they think it's too high or too low.
There's no combining the noes. Everybody gets one vote. You're either a yes or a no. If you're a no, you can indicate you're a no because you think the budget is too high, or you can place your vote no because it's too low. But you only get one vote. Okay?
But when the votes are counted and the tally is addressed, there's yeses and there's noes. The yes too high is combined with the yes too low.
The no too high is combined with the no too low.
No?
There's no combining of anything. The town council can combine them or not combine them. It's simply information. It compels the town council to do nothing. Okay, it's just information they can use if the referendum fails to come back with a second number. They could if everybody said it's too high, they could too low or too high, let's say too high, they could still come back with the same number. They do not have to go lower. That is absolutely not true that they're compelled to follow the advisory questions. They are not. I couldn't make it any clearer.
Okay, thank you very much. And the other questions I think that you have already answered. What is the estimated cost of a referendum for the budget? And is this a one-time cost or applicable to each following vote for the referendum? I think you said it was $20,000 to $22,000. So we don't need to spend time on that. Okay. On to section 2 already. How y'all doing? Okay. On this, Mr. Ambroise will speak first, and it concerns the question on the elimination of the RTM. Mr. Ambroise.
Yes, thank you, Joanne. Again, the RTM for me personally is near and dear to my heart. I served on the RTM for 8 years, 2 years of those being moderator of the RTM. To me, in my opinion, it is entry-level opportunity to get involved in Groton government. And for me, I actually have my neighbor and friend in the back. She was the one who got me involved and said, hey, get your butt out there and get involved in the community. And I said, what do I have to do? Get involved with the RTM. And of course, I got the information that it was a representative body that is diverse all throughout at that time it was 8 districts, but now it's 7. And everyone has a voice in that district, and they all represent the community and their neighbors. Again, it is, I believe personally, that it is false to claim that virtually no change to the core of town government is proposed when the elimination of the RTM would be a radical restructuring of the most powerful elected body in town. It is the one elected body most entwined with the voters. And by law, the RTM is required to provide seats for minority party representation. The volunteers who serve on the RTM are our friends and family. They live in our neighborhoods. They know what matters to us because the same things matter to them. Good town services and for all our residents and progressive education programs. This form of government is the most reflective and the representative republic the founders of our great nation intended. It's false to claim that charter visions would create a transparent annual budget process. Groton already has one. It's open, extensive, and it's line by line. And it's a development process that includes formal settings for citizens' input. Every month, every individual in town has the ability to come and speak to a specific point of interest for them. Should any RTM member have a choice to want to discuss anything about the budget, there's an open line item on the agenda every month to have those discussions. Also, these standing items are included in Board of Education and Town Council monthly meetings, which I believe some people just went and spoke at today at the Board of Ed. Furthermore, this process is delivered an on-time budget every year in order to operate the town into the next fiscal year. An annual budget referendum switch does not give you that guarantee. As I said, this RTM for me gives a lot of diversity in the town. I feel proud to live in my district. Most importantly, I feel proud because I have 4 females that are representing me right now, 4 of those women being African Americans. And to me, that process goes away and that gets eliminated when my district only has 1 representative that covers the rest of that part of town. Consolidation of elected office holders will be then shrunk from 59 currently down to 25. That is a consolidation of elected power in this town, and I think it shouldn't be passed. There will be less community involvement in the total governmental process. Now, I know that the discussion is on annual budget reform and the RTM, but you'll be just voting on a line number. Here at the RTM, you get involved in the holistic approach of Groton government, which now I would have the ability to be on school board task force, and also now I'm serving as a shellfish commissioner because of the experience that I had with that RTM. If you look at our current candidates for the state, 3 of those individuals that are running for the state started at the RTM, so they got involved at the ground level and worked their way up. Attendance. One of the arguments is that there was lack of attendance on the RTM and they didn't show up for meetings, but I looked at a lot of the meeting minutes and no meeting was canceled because there was a lack of a quorum in the monthly meeting. Okay? And to go on attendance point, 62% there was a 62% attendance rate of the charter revision members on the vote to accept their final report. 6 people in favor, 1 opposed, 4 people didn't show up. So that doesn't show a real good attendance record. I'm a teacher, that looks like a D-. No monthly meeting was canceled, as I said. And the solution, I wouldn't want to talk about these things without having solutions. There was an easy solution to solve that attendance problem if it was a big concern of the Charter Revision Commission group. All you had to do was reduce 1 member from each of the 7 districts to make it 34, still keeping the most powerful body in the town. Remember, they also have a check to the town council. If the RTM is replaced, there is no check on legislative ordinances that is readily available. It is a very encumbering process that would be very difficult for anyone who opposes the town council's will to move forward. As I spoke before, there's a deliberate line-by-line process, and they deliver the on-time budgets every year. The rubber stamp discussion is a little bit moot as well, because I think they did a good job this year. They actually rubber stamped the reduction that the town council proposed, which was a $1.8 million reduction in the Board of Ed budget, which was the minimum budget requirement. Our candidates, like I said, started at the RTM, and hopefully someday I could be one of those candidates in the future too, if I so choose to do it. The RTM is that best representative voice of our diverse community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambroise. Mr. Frink, why do you support the elimination of the RTM?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to be talking about the RTM as a government institution, not the RTM members who volunteer their time. Please keep that distinction in mind. Groton is the only town in Connecticut that has an RTM and a town council. There are only 6 other towns in Connecticut that have an RTM, and none of them have a town council as well. RTMs are disappearing. In March of this year, Amherst, Massachusetts voted to eliminate their RTM and go with a town manager, town council form of government. From January to September, the RTM had 9 scheduled monthly meetings. 3 of those meetings were canceled for lack of something to do: March, July, and August. For the other 6 meetings, RTM members voted on a total of 8 referrals and 3 ordinances. The RTM passed all 8 referrals by a 95% in favor voting margin and declined to veto any of the ordinances. I've asked around, no one can remember the last time the RTM vetoed an ordinance. This performance reflects a 100% approval rating of town council actions, which means that in the eyes of the RTM, the town council is getting it right, not just this year, but year after year. So I keep sending referrals and ordinance to the RTM when the outcome is 100% predictable. This is what most of us call make work, and our town government shouldn't be in the make work business. The RTM holds annual budget review meetings in the month of May. This year they held 7 budget meetings involving significant staff time. When all was said and done, the actions the RTM took resulted in a 7/100% decrease in the 2018 budget. 7/100%. Last year was 0.19%. Since the RTM acts at the very end of the legislative process and has a well-known 100% approval rating, we end up going through a needless parliamentary process where everyone knows the outcome from the beginning. This is not good use of town resources. Another aspect of the RTM is that they are perceived as our vital district representatives. Most people don't know who their RTM rep is. So how could they represent your interest if you don't know them? For many of us these days, our mobile devices like our cell phones are our primary link to town government. If I see a pothole in the street anywhere in town, I can take a picture of it with my phone and send it to Public Works, pworks@groton-ct.gov. If nothing happens in a reasonable amount of time, I can forward it to the town councilors and the town manager. I can also use my mobile device to read town council agendas and minutes, watch town council meetings, go through the budget, catch up on town manager's weekly report, and see what's going on at the library and senior center, and communicate my feelings on all this instantly to whoever I want. Time has moved on. The idea of a local rep being the vital to our living in Groton is no longer true. In summary, the 100% approval rating tells us that the RTM is completely redundant to the town council. The complete lack of meaningful action on the annual budget reinforces that. As far as a district rep being vital to us, we would have to start by knowing who they are first. Do we really need 50 elected people, 9 town council, 41 RTM, to set policy and oversee professional staff? The other 27 towns in Connecticut that have a town council get along just fine without an RTM. It's time we join them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frink. Okay, so the first question will go to you, Mr. Frink. Are RTM members elected? And if so, what's the difference between the RTM and a town council?
The RTM members are elected by district. It's proportional to each district. The town council is the legislative body of the town. That's what they are. The RTM quite honestly, they don't have a really strong definition in the current charter. They were put in, just my guess, back in 1955 when we went from a town meeting, first selectman town meeting form of government, to a town council, town manager. And I'm guessing the people back then wanted to keep some of the town meeting flavor, to keep an eye on what might have they thought of maybe a runaway town council, town manager. We have moved way beyond that since 1955. We now have, at least I do, I have complete, total confidence in the 9 members of the town council to be our single sole legislative body for this town. They do the hard work. They've got their sleeves rolled up. They're working on, you know, whether it's the merit property issue that pops in front of them or whatever, they're the ones that are doing the hard work, and we should be thankful for them. The RTM is not.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify what Mr. Frink said, because I guess in the charter it doesn't say this clearly, they approve the budget. That's the last thing that they do, and then the town council sets the mill rate and then imposes taxes on the town. So that's what their main charge is. They do have a power of initiative provision as well, and they also do veto those. Now, going back to one of the issues that was previously mentioned by Mr. Frink here, the history was at the current rate in the 1950s, it was about 25,000 people. We have changed a lot. We're at 40,000 people. So at the point when they decided to move from the Board of Finance part of government to now the RTM is pretty significant. So I think it is relevant in today's day and age. And just one last point to mention, we keep hearing this argument that there's no other town that has an RTM and a town council. But the last time I checked, there's only one Groton. There's only one Groton that has a sub-base, has an airfield, that has National Guard presence, that has Coast Guard presence, that has a university in our midst. We have a lot of unique and defining issues in areas of town. You can drive up, down from the west side of the Thames to the east side of the Mystic and see a whole different slice of Groton. And to me, it's more representative of Americana.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frink, if we go to a yearly referendum, are the voters more likely to research the budget before they vote, whether we have an RTM or not? Is the community more likely to do the research and have an informed vote?
Yeah, good question. And as I mentioned earlier, towns that do have budget referendums put out a very nice budget summary. Stonington, again, being a perfect example. 6 or 7 pages that talks about the major expenses, where revenue's coming from, where taxes are going, and that suits most people. If you want to read a 200-page plus budget book, you certainly can. On the other hand, there is no shame in people voting on what they can afford at the end of the day. That's what we all do anyway. But there will be there would be a summary of the budget that would make, that would make people intelligent voters. If you want to read the whole 250-page or whatever it is budget, have at it.
Thank you. Mr. Ambroise, any?
Yes, regarding annual budget referendum, we keep hearing that we're trying to compare ourselves to Stonington and Guilford and Preston and Sprague. Well, I just had to clarify things for the voting public out there. Sprague just passed their referendum 2 weeks ago, and they had about 12% turnout for that budget referendum. The first initial one was 18%. So if you look at actually who voted on the budget in approval, it's a lot thinner margin. It's single digits that actually got out there and vote. So that doesn't really show a reflective argument to me that it's your right, it's your vote, because not everyone is voting. Dean Antipas on the town council made a great point during his discussions on the 28th of November in 2017 when they voted down the budget. He said, how many people are going to actually download the document? How many people are going to buy that budget book at the town council office? And I think the number that they had was about 32 downloads and probably about the same amount as purchases. So that pretty much reminds me about 60-odd people that ended up taking the time to look over that budget, and I believe probably 40 of them had to get the budget book because we were RTM members.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next topic. The next topic is the Board of Finance. And Mr. Frink, you'll speak first on that topic, if you would.
The purpose of the Board of Finance is to work in partnership with and advise the Town Council in decision-making with financial analysis and recommendations, all of which will be available to the public. This includes being a watchdog for wasteful and extravagant spending, bringing timely financial expertise to the annual budget process, producing a 5-year rolling forecast of revenue expenses, including projections of the mill rate and taxes, issuing an annual budget development schedule, hold monthly public meetings with citizens' petitions and at least one public hearing during the annual budget review sessions. They will consist of 7 members elected by district for a 4-year term and will be a proactive group providing comprehensive and realistic financial information to our decision makers prior to and during the budget development process, unlike the RTM today that acts only after the major decisions have already been made. Here are some examples of where a financial watchdog would benefit us. You may or may not know that taxpayers have invested over $1.5 million in the former Fitch Middle School. This was for a new roof and various building code updates. The vision for this complex of buildings may be fantastic, but wouldn't it be a good idea for us to know what the vision is and what the long-term financial commitments are going to be before going much further? A Board of Finance would keep us appraised of investments like this and where they're going. Another thing you may not be aware of is that the town pays the city to maintain the 30 miles of town roads that are in the city. Refer to page 202 of the current budget, line item 10901. When you do the math, it turns out that the town pays the city at a rate that is more than twice what the town rate is. And this difference adds up to about $1 million a year. An independent Board of Finance would confront this issue and bring it to the public's attention. A footnote is that the town and city are currently engaged in a joint $60,000 study to see who has the best highway maintenance practices. Sort of odd that the town would pay to learn how to do something from an entity whose costs are twice what the town's are. A Board of Finance would give us some justification for these expenditures, if there are any. In 2017, the Town Council added $5 million to the budget to cover an unexpected shortfall in the state education funding that didn't happen. They did what they could in a tough situation then. But after receiving full funding from the state, the $5 million collected from taxes remained in the town treasury. It wasn't returned to the taxpayers. Worse, it appears that the $5 million was in the tax levy again this year. Refer to page 41 in the 2018 budget book for that. A Board of Finance would advocate for us on items like this. In the budget process, an independent Board of Finance will perform a review of the town manager's budget in March, holding at least one public hearing. In this review, they will consider the balance between town and education budgets, between fixed and discretionary costs, between immediate needs and long-term goals, and if the proposed budget is in line with Town Council guidance for that year. Taking public comments in mind, they pass their recommendations on to the Town Council for final action. This will greatly enhance the budget process by putting budget decision-making in daylight and causing the budget review work of the Town Council to be more efficient and meaningful. Critics say the Board of Finance is an advisory board that has no teeth. A more accurate way to look at it is that the Town Council makes final decisions based on the recommendations of the Board of Finance. These recommendations, made in public, will carry a lot of weight which the Town Council and the public will benefit from. Also, since when is getting advice a bad thing? Most of us have paid for advice, and probably many times. In summary, if we had a Board of Finance today, we would know more about the financial impact of the future plans for the former Fitch Middle School complex. The rationale for the ongoing $1 million differential payment for road maintenance work in the city, and what the reason is for a $60,000 joint town-city study on road maintenance. Why that $5 million tax bump from 2006-17 is still with us. And we'd have a whole lot more daylight on the 2019 budget development process, which is about ready to get started in November. There are 121 towns in Connecticut that have a Board of Finance. Based on these examples, we should be number 122. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frink. Okay, Mr. Ambroise, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, the Board of Finance, this was an elected body that was last used during the 1950s when our town was at a population of 25,000. And at that time, the residents thought wisely that a growing town would be better served with a different approach to Groton government. They created a framework of the charter that governs us today, an RTM and a town council. Why would vote yes want to take us back 60 years when our population has increased to 40,000 people and become more diverse? Here are the few concerns that I have and the Vote No group have with the part of this charter revisions. First and foremost, this is an advisory-only position. Similar to what Mr. Frink just mentioned about the advisory-only question about no on the annual budget referendum, it has no vote or veto power on the town council. What happens if the town council doesn't agree with what the Board of Finance says? What is their recourse? There is none. Does it become a bully pulpit? I don't know. District representation, that was one of the big issues that they actually included in the final report, but they're decreasing the elected officials in town by 34 is not truly representative of Groton elections. 80% reduction in the elected government office holders, especially in our two subdivisions, the ones that pay the most taxes for all of town. 34% of our tax base comes from District 2 and District 3, and another 10% comes out of District 7. Those people will be disenfranchised. Minority representation is not required in the Board of Finance because they are district represented. So it really is inconsistent on what we'll be discussing as our next topic of minority party representation on the town council. It's inconsistent. And most importantly, there's no qualifications for someone to be on the Board of Finance. So it could be a popularity contest. We might not have individuals that are actually truly knowledgeable in that particular area. I have to go back to one of the discussions that was mentioned at a town council hearing on October 3rd. One of the former town councilors had mentioned, what if one district doesn't have someone smart enough to be a Board of Finance member, or someone isn't ready to step up to the plate? That, to me, is a little, disrespectful for these diverse individuals in Groton. Taxpayers are not empowered when they can only vote for one member of the seven-member Board of Finance. Voters are especially diminished when one considers this Board of Finance would not be granted any of this voter veto power over the town council. There's no regular check or ready accessible check and balance authority over the town council like the RTM possesses right now. Furthermore, the Board of Finance is a 4-year appointment and not required to have minority party representation, as I said, and it is a glaring contradiction to the discussion. I keep going back to comments that are made on the yes side, and one of the big ones that I have is they say that no town has a board of a town council and an RTM. Well, after doing a little research, there is no town in the state of Connecticut that has an advisory-only Board of Finance. And one of their discussions that they're saying is we're going to need changes to the charter in the future. My question is right now, why didn't you do it right the first time? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the questions from the audience concerning the Board of Finance. Mr. Ambroise, you get the first question this time. How will finance members be selected? Are they elected, and who nominates them?
That's a great question, Joanne. Well, initially, to my understanding, the first Board of Finance members would be appointed by the town council, and this kind of is interesting because one of the discussions at a town council meeting was why doesn't the town council just appoint a finance commission? You don't have to change the charter in order to do that, and then you could leave the town council to doing legislative body work, and then you could have the finance commission do that kind of work. Apparently, it's okay. You could do that. But they will be appointed, and then eventually in November of 2019, we will be voting in Board of Finance members from each of the 7 districts. Now, again, it does not have minority party representation, so you could have a complete sweep of any party. And I also want to mention, we're not representative of the other parties in town. Most of the voting public is undecided. So how are they getting included in this process as well?
And Mr. Frink.
Yeah, thank you. Could you repeat the question? That was so long.
Yes, indeed. How will the finance members be selected? Are they elected, or who nominates them?
Okay, yeah. So, right, so the Board of Finance will be elected. It will be nominated just like a town council person is nominated by the parties. You could petition yourself on a ballot. So they'll be elected like any other elected person in town. As far as the Board of Finance being advisory, the town council is designed to make the final decision. So we have one point of accountability. And it's true that it is advisory, and we thought there was, let's crawl, walk, run with this thing. Board of Finance is new in Groton, so let's take it easy to begin with and grow it over time, and in 3 or 4 years or 5 years, let the Board of Finance members who've been there with some experience determine what so-called teeth they want. But again, there's really nothing wrong with advice. As far as no quals for that, there is no qualification for any elected person except your age and whether or not you were born in the United States. We know you can be president with just 35 years old and been born in the United States.
Thank you very much. And we did answer one question that there's not a minority representation rule with this. Is that true?
No, there is none. No minority party representation rule.
Mr. Frink?
Well, the minority party representation will be up to the voters. This is a voter, so they'll vote on the members, and we have already identified potential Board of Finance candidates from some of the tougher parts of town where you might not think you'd get a candidate, and we've identified some. We'll make those names available to the town council. There are very qualified people out there.
Thank you very
Joanne,
much.
may I have one follow-up, just a brief 30 seconds? A lot of the discussion...
Is that acceptable
Well,
to
I'm
you,
going
Mr. Frink?
to ask for the same thing.
That's fine, because
Okay.
I'd like to get some explanation on this. Again, the argument that's being said here is that we're replacing the RTM with an annual budget referendum, but Mr. Frink himself stated that the RTM takes up a lot of staff time. This Board of Ed is going to do, this Board of Finance will do the exact same thing. So you're basically taking one elected group and consolidating it into the hands of 7 people, but yet still requiring the office time, the videotaping, and the town clerk's usage.
Thank you, Mr.
The
Frink.
Board of Finance will be an independent body. Unlike the RTM today that is in 100% lockstep with the town council, the Board of Finance will be independent. They'll be our financial watchdogs as they are in other towns. There's virtually no risk in this, in getting a Board of Finance. Virtually no risk.
Thank you. And the last question that I have on this topic, what authority will the Finance Board have? What will they vote on, the total budget or departmental budget separately and the Board of Ed budget?
It's a great question. I'd love to know the answer to that. One of the things that I've been hearing, at least, is that the RTM doesn't involve itself with 80% of the employee budgets because they're not involved with negotiations and contracts. This Board of Finance will do nothing of the sort. The Board of Education involves themselves with the teachers' union and the administrators' union. The town council and their staff deal with the negotiations for those collective bargaining agreements. So the Board of Finance has no power on any of those things. It's not going to, it could make suggestions and recommendations like Mr. Frink has said, but it won't have any power on what the town council ends up deciding in the long run.
Well, so I get a...
Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's true. The RTM has no power over the wage, salary, and benefit packages approved by the town council. When the town council approves them, that's it. What the RTM's job this year was to find the money from somewhere to pay for the raises given by the town council. They had to dig into the fund balance and contingency to pay for the raises. A Board of Finance would have projected those costs out, help the town understand the cost impact of any of these negotiated contracts. And what's wrong with that? I mean, that seems to be, they're covering our back. The Board of Finance has our back in the financial world of our town. And I say we need them. I gave you a number of examples where there's financing under the radar that we would benefit from having it in more daylight. So.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. And we're to the last section now. We're going to talk about the term of office, term limits. And Mr. Ambroise, you speak first.
I think it was
Oh.
Mr. Frink, though, right? I just had the last one? On Board of Finance?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No,
I
I did Board
I
of Finance
thought-
first. I did Board of Finance first.
You should have.
Yeah, I did.
Okay, then you get to
Yeah.
go first.
I do?
On the terms of office.
Okay.
Yes.
This of all things is probably the one that is most alarming to me, as well as all Groton residents. Your voter rights will be diminished significantly if you go from a 2-year term to a 4-year term. The argument for people saying we should have a 4-year term is that they need to learn the ropes to figure out town council operations. I say, if you need to learn the ropes, you probably shouldn't have been elected to begin with, and you shouldn't have ran. So for us, you are diminishing your voting rights in half, because right now it's currently 2-year terms. 88% of Connecticut towns have 2-year terms, as well as the state legislature and the state senate. So we're in lockstep with the proper way to recall or re-elect the individuals that are doing things in our best interest or possibly in our worst interest. The taxpayers are not empowered when they have this increase to 4 years. It keeps the office holders directly and regularly accountable to the voters. Extending terms only insulates office holders and diminishes the power of the voters. Voting rights, like I said, will be cut in half. It will restrict the rights to re-elect good and recall ineffective leaders. The Connecticut General Statute states Groton's minority party representation will no longer be active with the elimination of the RTM, and I believe this has serious unintended consequences, or maybe intended. If the approval of these charter revisions, City of Groton Council will be required to have minority party representation. This is based on Connecticut General Statute 9-167A. I encourage everyone to take a look at that. If we lose the RTM as a town, then it would automatically trigger the city council to do the same thing. The town council will require 3 seats of the opposition party. Some people on the yes side have said they would be elected. They're not being elected. If you look at the last election as a snapshot, 2017 had a switch from 8 party members to 1 in opposition to a complete sweep to the opposite of 9 party members. If we were to vote next year like that, then 3 people would be appointed, not elected, they would be appointed to the position without getting a majority of votes. That is voter disenfranchisement, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Mr. Frink.
Thank you. Well, the 4-year term, we did debate that quite a bit, and we had a young lady on the commission, who's a young professional, who, just in my memory, was the one who really lobbied for the experience part of this. And the other members as well valued experience over the 2-year cycle. That we've got things we're trying to tackle here, like Project 2020. If you're going to dive into regionalization issues, if you're going to dive into cost of health care, you need a lot more than 2 years to accomplish those kinds of things. The 2-year cycle is a churn. People come and go and come and go, and really there is a loss of experience. Now, it is true, you lose that vote every 2 years, but you gain a more professionalism in our legislative body. And recall that the Board of Ed has had 4-year terms for years. So that seems to work out. And I served on the town council, and there was talked amongst ourselves all the time. This should be 4 years, because you get into a budget cycle. The first one, it's a fire hose feed. The second year, you're just getting on your feet to understand what's going on in this town, and you're up for re-election, and you got the lawn signs out again. So the 4-year term would give us, I think, some stability, and I think would benefit. Would benefit a lot in town to have that experience. Again, if we're going to be supporting the 2020 project, looking at regionalization, tough things like that take experience and take time. You just don't get them done in 2 years. On minority party, that's a state law, and we're under that law right now. The only reason we don't have to do it is we're exempt because we have the RTM, but every other town that has a town council is under, I believe, is under that minority, and it's there for a reason. The state wouldn't put it in there. Our state legislators wouldn't have made it a law without a good reason. The tyranny of the majority, the tyranny of the minority, whatever you want to call it, but I personally don't have a problem with minority representation. I think it's a good thing. He's mentioned minority representation all night. Now he doesn't like it. The other thing is that other towns do periodically update their charter. We did talk, he jumped on that a little bit earlier. Newtown, for instance, updated their charter every 4 years since the 1960s. So if the 4-year term doesn't work out, we could fix it. There's nothing that we couldn't do that. New London and other communities, they have a 7-person charter review board that is a standing board that looks at issues just like that within their community, and then they come up with a solid list that goes to a charter revision commission. We could adopt something like that. The point here is, let's move the big rocks first. Okay, that's what you do in life when you've got issues. So we move the big rocks, the budget referendum, the Board of Finance, the RTM, and we can fill in later the other things.
Thank you very much. It's certainly giving us a lot to think about. The questions on this section, Mr. Frink, is what does the minority representation rule mean?
It's minority party, and it's in the state statutes. I could almost give you the number, but it requires that the most, in a 9-person body, like the town council, the most you can have of one party is 6. And then you have 3 of the other. If it gets more complicated than that, the town clerk would get involved and work things out. But that's the statute, as I know it.
Do you have anything to add to that, Mr.
Yes.
Ambroise?
Again, like I mentioned, Connecticut General Statute 9-167A exempts us with that, along with that special act of the Connecticut General Statutes, from minority party representation on the town council. It's because the RTM is there. Lawn signs are going to be perpetual with these charter change. You're going to have elections, so many elections, your head's going to spin. You're going to have one on the third Tuesday in May. You're going to have one in every November, because you have to have municipal elections regardless, because the Board of Finance staggered terms. The House elections every 2 years, the state elections every 2 years, the city council in off-year elections. We're going to be voting nonstop. These signs aren't leaving. They're going to be stuck on everybody's lawn for yes, no, too high, too low, who knows. Big rocks crush people. Okay, so this charter revision, in my opinion, will crush us as a diverse town. And I can't, that's why I'm here right now. I'm not involved with any elected position anymore, and I feel really passionate about this, and this town is very unique and special to me, and that's why my family moved here 13 years ago, and I don't want to see drastic changes like this on serious Groton issues.
Okay, thank you. And one last question on this topic, okay, is Mr. Frink, I'll let this go to you first. How does lengthening the town council term to 4 years, not staggered, affect the influence of the electorate over the elected? How does lengthening the town council term to 4 years, not staggered, affect the influence of the electorate over the elected? Tough question.
Yeah. Well, it's a 4-year term, so you want to get the best people you can for the 4 years. Again, it comes back to me to an experience issue. So we do give up something to gain experience to deal with the issues I mentioned. It's a trade-off. If it doesn't work, change it. But the 4-year term for town councils has been spoken in town council chambers for years, I can tell you. You just get there, and it seems there you are running again. And you're just getting your feet in the ground, and you're out, or you're running again and whatever. You can't, if we're going to engage in these long-term issues, and we want to be successful with them, we're going to need people that stick with it.
Yeah, if this is the trade-off, I say no deal. Because, again, there's too many rights that are lost as a voter for this trade-off of 2-year to 4-year terms. What if that person isn't the most qualified individual, and I find out year 1 that they aren't doing the job? How do I recall it? What is the recourse? I don't have one. I have to wait 4 years to figure it out. And to me, that just doesn't work. And again, I have to go back to the most important point that I feel is critical in this discussion that the other side doesn't want to discuss. City Council in the city of Groton will be affected negatively by this vote, because that elimination of that minority party representation statute will then get turned on the City Council, and it might be done by design. Because now, right now, they have 6 members of one particular party, and if they change that, they're going to end up having 2 automatic seats. They don't even have to run for election. All they would have to do is just put their name on the ballot, and they're automatically in the discussion, when that's not what the voters decided. The voters decided one way, yet we're going to change the rights of the voters.
Can I just say one thing on that?
Is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
We're
sure,
talking
go
about a
ahead.
state law. This is a state law. So that's where minority representation comes from. It doesn't come from the charter. We didn't dictate it. We don't have any ulterior motives on that. It's a consequence of eliminating the RTM, which, as I have said, is totally redundant at the town council. And you're suggesting we should keep the RTM so we can protect the city council from being having minority representation. How selfish is that?
Okay.
Well, again, now may I retort, please? I live in the city of Groton, but I consider myself part of all of Groton. And they have their own government by law, by Connecticut statute, just like you were mentioning previously. So now you're going to have 5 other districts in town voting on whether or not the city has the right to exist like they see fit. To me, that doesn't seem like a good deal.
Okay, now I have a stack of questions, and I'm going to I'm going to let, it's hard to pick. You guys have some great questions, and I don't have time for all of them. But this is a real easy, quick one. Are RTM members paid, and if so, how much?
They are not paid. They are volunteers, and as I've said, we've got a great diverse group of individuals right now. We have individuals that are stay-at-home moms that have their significant others serving on patrol for our great nation. We have individuals who are from all parts of this area looking to represent everybody in their town. Now, again, one of the big situations that I had with this is that members that are in favor of charter changes said that everyone that gets up at a budget meeting has some compelling argument to keep some budget items because they either work for the town, know somebody that works for the town, or is a family member of someone in town. And I call Boulder Dash on that because there are a lot of other interests for those people. Keeping good Groton services, keeping teachers in schools to educate our most important resource that we have, our students. I believe personally that it's the RTM's job to do their line-by-line, deliberate, on-time budget, and the annual budget referendum won't do that.
Okay. This is a good general question. Mr. Frink, I'll give this to you first. As a homeowner, explain how is your position, yes, an advantage to me?
What was that again?
As a homeowner, explain how your position is an advantage to me. You want something more specific?
Yeah, I don't, as a homeowner, how is my advantage to him, the questioner? I have no idea.
Yes.
I don't have.
It's too general?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be able to vote on the budget. You're going to have a Board of Finance to be a watchdog on your finances. I don't get the question.
Okay. Is a citizen who doesn't have the time to read the budget and make an informed vote, should that person vote on the budget if the charter reform passes?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, there is no shame in voting on what you can afford. We make decisions every day on that basis. I can't, we talk about the RTM. I don't know how many of them actually read the budget book, but The problem really with that is that we've got the town council and the RTM both looking at the budget with magnifying glasses. And no one's looking at what's coming at us in the future. No one's looking out over the horizon. So we could have the best people in the world on the RTM doing their job, but it's still a total duplicate of what the town council has already done, and they make no changes to what the town council has done. So.
Okay, Mr. Ambroise.
Well, I'm pretty offended by that statement, because I know I looked at that budget for 8 years. It was my job to do so. The people elected me to do it, and they reelected me because I did apparently a pretty good job. As I said before, and if you can look back on a couple of the town council meeting minutes and videos, Dean Antipas said it plainly himself. In the last 5 years, they did make reductions, and I know Mr. Frink says that 0.00%. Again, the question that was asked is, what can Groton afford? If I looked at that number and said $120 million, blah, 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 anybody who looks at that number is going to say, I can't afford it. But there's a lot of individual nuances that go along with that. And one thing to remember, regardless of the RTM approving the budget or the budget referendum approving the budget, you still have the next process after, which is a huge problem, is the setting the mill rate and an application of taxes. So you could come in with this illusion that you're going to end up saving money on taxes because you cut spending. But then you find out your revenues come in short, and then the taxpayer's bill is going to go higher. So there's different ways that you could have changed the charter as a whole, and these changes don't solve the problem, which is a revenue problem.
Okay, and then the last question, Mr. Frink, I'll bring it to you first. If the budget referendum fails at the polling station, how many times can it be repeated? Is there a limit to the number of times it'll go to referendum?
Right. So we did not put any limits in, and I explained why earlier. Typically, referendums pass in the first vote. Stonington has passed theirs in the first. When the last 10 years, they've passed it on the first time 9 out of 10 years. It does, sometimes it takes 2, 3 is rare, beyond 3 is really rare. But understand this, that no matter what, we will have a budget on July 1. If no budget is passed, then the previous year's budget goes in place. So everybody gets paid, things go on, we don't stop. Let's look at the dynamics of what would drive a multiple referendum vote. There would have to be a complete disconnect between the town, the budget, town administration, and the people. If you can't get together within 2 or 3 tries, you have a huge disconnect. You're not in the same place. This did happen in Stonington in 2008 with the Great Recession. Lehman Brothers fell apart, and the economy was horrible. Yes, it took 5 times. Extremely rare, and it takes extremely rough economic conditions to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ambroise, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Again, what Mr. Frink just mentioned is there is no guarantee that the budget will be passed in the first time. And that, to me, is a little bit concerning. If you look at what happened in Sprague, you look at what happened in Preston this year. Preston waited 2 weeks before the school year started to approve their budget. Now, how does that work with administrators and teachers and staffing to get ready for the next upcoming year? That, to me, is a little bit frightening. The redundancy that he just mentioned was pretty interesting as well. If it doesn't pass on the first go-round, you have a 2-week turnaround, 7 days for the town council to make adjustments on the advisory questions only, and then you have to go back 7 days later and vote on it. One thing to mention, absentee voters will not get a second chance to vote on this referendum question. It's their money too, and they don't have their vote. The redundancy, like I said, was pretty interesting because you're going to go into the new fiscal year with a different number than would actually be approved. So you're going to end up having to scramble using staff time and all those things to go ahead and reset everything and get the checks out on time for teachers and police officers, so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you very much. It is time for our closing statements. Mr. Ambroise, you will go first. It's 2.5 minutes for each closing statement.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I would like to thank everyone who attended this evening. And for those watching at home, thanks again to the Groton Public Library staff, the Groton Municipal Television, and especially the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this important debate. It was very helpful. In conclusion, we as the Vote No Charter Revisions PAC believe that the radical restructuring of our government will not help all of Groton voters. Yes, it will satisfy a small group of citizens that believe as government we should roll back services and programs in order to save money for the taxpayers in Groton. However, not all Groton residents are taxpayers. Think for a second. What is our most valuable town asset? It's the students in our schools. They are not taxpayers yet. We still have a moral duty to provide an appropriate education for them so that they can have the best chance at success in the 21st century. These residents will be the future of our town. We as a town should not deny them these services. I do also want to point out that no political party has taken a position on charter revisions. This is a nonpartisan issue. I will say, though, countless of residents from both political parties, former town mayors, town and city councilors, RTM and Board of Ed members with decades of volunteer public service to our government are speaking out, rejecting charter revisions proposed. Also, on the record, for one, and in personal discussions with me or other Vote No PAC members, most of our candidates and current representatives running for state election this November reject the changes as well. If anyone here at home may challenge this statement, I encourage you to please contact any of those candidates directly and ask where they stand on this issue. The Vote No PAC does agree that the town charter does need a few adjustments, but the comprehensive changes on the ballot in 2 weeks will not make Groton great. It could cause serious damage to the diverse community that we all call home. One budget vote gained means many other voters' right lost. Keep good Groton government. Just say no on question 3, November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Frink.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly, 72 other towns do have a budget referendum every year, and they somehow get it done. So I don't see why that would be a problem to us. Your yes vote will accomplish the following. It will keep what works. It maintains the town council, town manager form of government. Town council sets policy, elected at large, stays at 9 members. Town manager executes policy and runs the town. No change to the Board of Education. No change to any of the 28 agencies, boards, and commissions. Virtually no change to the best working parts of our government. The town council has the final approval of the recommended budget. Your voice approves the budget, like 72 other towns in Connecticut. Your yes vote will give us a Board of Finance, just like the other 121 towns in Connecticut that already have one. For more details on this historic proposal, go to grtv2018.org. That's grtv2018.org. Use the Contact Us page to set up a meeting or ask your questions. We'll have 2 more information sessions, one tomorrow night right in this room at 7 o'clock and October 30th in here at the same place. Thanks again to the League of Women Voters and the Groton Public Library and all of you who came out. This is a historic opportunity. The proposed changes exist all around Connecticut and have for years. They're common, practical, and time-proven. You heard the other side loud and clear. Believe me when I tell you, this is your one and only chance to make history in Groton. If this fails, rest assured you won't have another chance to vote on the budget or bring much-needed transparency to taxing and spending. Make history on November 6th. Vote yes to join all the other successful communities in Connecticut that have already taken this step. Please vote yes on November 6th, and thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. The League of Women Voters is 98 years old this year, and we're dedicated to stuff like this. This is just democracy in action. Your participation here as an audience and the incredible dedication, the research that these men have put into this work, and all the people have supported them in putting this work together is what democracy is all about. And I know that when you go into the booth on November 6th, that you're going to vote for what you truly believe is best for the city that you love so much. And the League wishes you well.